Hey there, welcome to episode 79 of the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo, recording today in the afternoon, 2:40 p.m. on Friday, August 30, 2024. A lazy Friday. The joy of always working or selecting when to not always be working. The life of a solopreneur, as they say. Today we're going to speak about one of our, not just me, projects, which is still on the back burner. I'll touch on that at the end. We call it Casa Nunzia, hence the title of this episode. Wherever you found this audio program, hopefully you are able to see the episode description, which contains the show notes. There are only the two usual self-promotion and one background link in the links. Before we get to that, I'll remind you that the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program is about impresarios, people who are making it happen, doing interesting things, entrepreneurs, innovators, members of the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem, members, participants, enablers. If you're thinking real ecosystem, the fauna, maybe even the flora, who knows? So we talk about those things here. There was a time when we would have guests on. It's been a while. That will return. I have mentioned one of my other projects, the information sharing platform that we're working with the Innovate for Vegas Foundation on. And disclosure, I am the managing director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation. Ways of sharing information, including startups, so that discussions of entrepreneurs and innovation can be discovered. So then it will be, I hope, easier to attract entrepreneurs who may otherwise have no idea that such discussions are available to them and such visibility can be afforded. Being discovered in Vegas is tricky unless you are building or tearing down something, committing substantial crimes, running for political office. It's about the same thing. And yes, I'm talking about TELUS. The headlines are about an ex-politician who has now been convicted of murdering a reporter. So yeah, he gets news. You don't want to make news that way. You want to make news for your entrepreneurial endeavors and your innovative efforts. So yeah, that's the direction we're going in. Anyway, the show notes for today's episode, hopefully you can find them. I'll read the summary real quick. We'll go through the 3 links and get on. Technology is moving fast into the future while we humans continue at our normal human pace. Is technology there to help us out later? Or is it always about now? I think you know where I'm heading with this. Something to think about, something to collaborate and co-create, perhaps. A lot of technology is aimed at gee whiz, built-in obsolescence, planned obsolescence. So you want someone to buy your technology now. Early adopters fund your next product development with higher prices. They must have it now before everyone else. But trailing edge technologies are the ones that end up in the assistive column, helping people live better lives and so on. And so many people I've spoken with run into the shoulder shrug. That's all we have. It doesn't really work for you, but that's what we got. So there isn't a lot of attention paid. I've experienced this here in Vegas when we at the Innovate for Vegas Foundation attempted to have a accessibility hackathon for the city or the region at large, ways of capturing accessibility issues and so on, or whatever would enter the hackathon arena for ideation and innovation. And I heard back, couldn't we do something more interesting? Said by someone who has yet to encounter a need for such things. So yeah, it's mostly a case of ignorance until you get there, and then you say, man, I wish somebody would design a better whatever it is. And again, I've talked to enough people in that circumstance that it is true. So that's what Casa Nunzia is about, and I will describe in more detail. That's what the show is about. But first, I will mention the shameless self-promotion links. You know them by heart unless you're just joining us. buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo, Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/Dan Hugo. You can visit these websites and pay no money. You're under no obligation. You're not obligated in any way to spend any money. But I do use these sites to promote my various media productions and other projects. It's really just a place to put some links on a website that I don't have to manage or maintain, other than my profile page and whatnot. So I have to feed some content in, but I don't have to buy domains and so on. I've done that too. That's a separate thing. So visit either of those sites. When I do finally get websites up for everything, this is a topic I've covered previously on the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program, the priority inversion challenge. Putting up websites is important, but not as important to the other things I'm working on. So it gets moved to the bottom, but it's on the list, and someday soon. So visit those sites, keep up with stuff. I do have links directly to the Spotify for Podcasters homepage. I would like to be the primary point of publication for my audio programs. So that's where the websites come in. Anyway, check those out. buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo, Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo. Tell a friend, who knows. And I have one article in Wired. It's from 2020. Ironically, it's from February of 2020. I'll get to why that's ironic in a moment. But an article about Casa Jasmina, which may remind you of Casa Nunzia. And in fact, that was part of the inspiration for the name anyway. A bit of a homage, if you will. But we'll get to that inspiration. You can read that article. You can search for Casa Jasmina as indicated. And you can find out some other stories and what they were working on and their various photo galleries and whatnot. It was a cool idea, and I will describe how I encountered Casa Jasmina in a few seconds. So those are the links, the show notes, the shameless self-promotion. Let's get on with the show. I have mentioned before that I used to work for Intel Corporation. Today, if you look in the news, you will probably still see Intel making news. If it's a few years from now, you may wonder, what was Intel again? At the rate they're going. I was working in the Maker Innovator Group, which was a very forward-looking, makers tend to be younger people, so very forward-looking into the future of brilliance and innovation from people who are just getting started today. So it was an interesting place to work. I had an opportunity to head out to Torino, if you like, and visit the Arduino folks with whom we had a partnership in product development, product collaboration in a few of our products, Galileo, Edison, Arduino 101, and the never really quite out there in the world Joule, which really didn't fit the Arduino mold. Anyway, so I visited Italy a couple weeks, hung out at the Officine. I think I'm saying that right. Officine? No, Officine. If it's two C's, it would be Officine. Officine Arduino in Turin in the Toy Box co-work space. It's actually pretty cool. The Toy Box was built next to a factory. Turin was known for, or I guess they say Torino. I'm not sure who prefers which. It was built attached to, I guess, a factory. Turin is a place where Fiat cars and other manufacturing was taking place. So there were some old factories not in use and whatnot. So Toy Box fits into a kind of an industrial commercial area, and it had this attached building. So, or attached, or just generally, through a doorway and you're into another structure. So when we were there it was in November, they were in the middle of building out a living development space, which they would call Casa Jasmina, to be placed on Airbnb, for example. You could stay in what they were calling a hackable apartment, or what I would call a live-make space, not a live-work space. When we were there, it was very early in its construction phase, or renovation, I guess. A lot of tenant improvements to be done. And I commented to the person driving the project, his name still is, Lorenzo. And I said, wow, this place is, did you ever see Fight Club? And he said, Dan, that's not nice. I said, well, hey, it'll look better with some work. They did eventually make it into a nice looking spot. You can go find some photos and whatnot. This is not about Casa Jasmina, though, although that was partial inspiration. It did launch. They did some projects. It ran for a few years, which you can read about in that Wired article. They made a 2-year commitment. It ran for 5 years, according to the what they describe. It's not clear that they made any like inventions happen. It was more of an interactive experiment, I think. Not judging, just not sure what the real outcomes were, or if they actually had specific outcomes planned. So they moved on to other things. The founders and facilitators did, and you can read about that, or again, search around. They have a GitHub organization with a few projects in there, not updated since 2020. So you're looking into the past. Meanwhile, let's see. And by the way, I did have a call when we were putting this together many years ago. Back in it was 2019. Production by Street. It was 2019 or so, 2018, 2019. We were talking about Casa Nunzia, and I had a chat with Davide Gumba, who was driving. I met him when he was working at Arduino. He was driving Casa Jasmina, and I said, would you be okay with this sort of name overlap, and here's the reasons and whatnot, and here's what we intend to do, and here's the idea, and he was all for it. So yeah, it wasn't stealing anything. So meanwhile, I was at CES. This is probably 2018. I was speaking to one of my colleagues, my Intel colleagues, while we were working in the Intel booth, which was kind of interesting. This was the year where they had Production by Street. This is the year where they had the exercise. They had treadmills and people running on treadmills. And one of the devices that one of the kind of creative people, I guess you could say, one of the advanced technology development folks had worked on were some earbuds that were somehow self-charging or something, wireless charging. I can't remember. They they didn't really get productized, I guess. They got productized, but only briefly. But anyway, so I was working in the booth answering questions and whatnot. I knew the answers back then. And so I was talking to a fellow developer. She was working up in Portland, and she had worked on the Intel dress, if anyone is familiar with that. That's a topic for another time, perhaps. Wearable technologies, high-tech fashion, responsive clothing. The Intel dress famously had an EEG, I think. They would measure, I think they were measuring galvanic skin response, maybe brain waves, certainly EKG, and they were generally measuring a stress response and would deploy defensive items on the garment. So the garment was a 3D printed, I'll say plastic, to keep it simple, plastic, sort of a shell, and it had motors on the back, and they had what I think they called spider legs that would come out. So it would basically deploy some items that would make it look a little bit bigger, a little bit more menacing to scare away a threat. So it was an interesting demonstration, visually interesting. It still makes the rounds. It's still around. And the designer, Anouk Wipprecht from Holland, is still very much a character that you will see and hear about and working on some interesting projects. So that was all well and good. So my colleague, Carolina, I had to pause to take a drink of water there. So sorry if there was a little discontinuity. My colleague, Carly, was working with Anouk, and she did some coding and whatnot. And so we were talking about her interest in kind of, well, you could say assistive technologies, technologies that would help you deal with the stress that the panic or the stress response that the Intel dress was demonstrating, anxiety, other sort of often under measured or under recognized, I guess, challenges that people face. And we got to talking eventually about an idea she had for a flower, like a vase, some sort of a flower that would respond to some measurements and would indicate your mood. And funny story, I said, oh, like in E.T., and she said, what's that? So that's what you get when you work with younger people. Anyway, we then got to talking about the value. Let me take a pause here. I got to turn off my air conditioner. Okay, we're back. Sorry, my air conditioner seems to add some noise, which may appear as a hum. I'll try to go back and filter that if possible. Anyway, so Carly and I were talking about her flower, and then her flower idea and ET, and we got to talking about how homes could be responsive to the people living in them. So yeah, you could actually have your home be responsive and not only make flowers reflect your emotional state, but you could have your whole home responding. Maybe if you were if you were feeling down or tired, it might open the blinds. We were talking about color shift paint, so the walls might brighten up a little bit. You could have music play, your favorite music, to either end the day or begin. And some of these things are sort of available now. You can have a wake up and go to bed mode for your home automation devices, but usually they're time based. They're not looking at you. They're not, here's looking at you, kid. They're not measuring. They're not paying attention. So you program it. It might be the moment you walk in the door. It might be the time of day. It might be aligned with sunset, sunrise, etc. But these are very early notions, early iterations of this sort of thing. So if your house is paying attention to you, much like the flower notion, right? So now your whole house is doing something like the E.T. If you don't know what E.T. is, the extraterrestrial Steven Spielberg movie, when the E.T. alien was dying, everything around it sort of wilted, and then when it got better, they all sprang back to life. So an indication to young Elliot that E.T. was doing okay. So the notion was, what if you could make your whole home sort of keep track of you, keep up with your state of affairs, and react accordingly, to sort of look out for you. So, right there, I said, oh, it'd be interesting to make something like a Casa Jasmina, a hackable apartment, but it's actually about assistive technology specifically, not general hackable apartment. But what if you actually were focusing on what works and what does not in the space of accessible technology, or assistive? I don't know if I've said accessible a couple times. Assistive technologies. So assistive technologies, by the way, voice activated is probably one of the more obvious ones, assuming you can speak and that it can understand you. There are some cases where only one of those might be true. So devices that respond to motion, there may be devices that measure your body weight, so they can measure your health over time. Load cells under your bed, or smart bathrooms are a thing now, sort of. So nothing's really integrated, and it's usually more gee whiz, if I may say, than practical. And without sensor fusion of some kind, you're not getting like a whole picture. A smart home, as Massimo Bonzi from Arduino said at Maker Faire one year. He said, a smart toilet is not so useful that people in the cloud know when I'm flushing. Something to that effect. And that is true. Merely knowing that you're using the restroom is interesting to someone, perhaps, but not the full picture. So yeah, what would happen if your home would actually be taking care of you, looking after you? And what if you could do so with a development environment and do what's called co-creating with the people living in the home, the occupants, so that you could actually make better products? And so Casa Nunzia sprang from this. So if we add it up, with so many hackathons that I had attended, with connections to schools, I mostly mean colleges, MIT, Rutgers, there were some other ones. But in general, reaching out to schools in that capacity was not difficult. A lot of innovation going on in schools. And as it happens, a lot of people that would benefit from assistive technologies also in those schools, pursuing degrees in those directions sometimes. So encountering an interaction with makers all over the place, interacting with places like First Build in Kentucky, in Louisville, and Arduino, of course, and even some contacts at Amazon's Lab 126, from which the awful products that so often interrupt my recordings come. But hey, they make a voice recognition platform that was reasonably popular at the time. Now, even Amazon doesn't like the platform, and they want to charge you to keep using it with their new AI. So we'll see what happens there. But the bottom line is this: all of these pieces and parts are spread out, and no one appeared to be, and I think this is still true, no one appears to be connecting the dots, as that expression goes. So what if we could focus some of the various pieces on a concerted effort, a collaborative effort, to develop and continue developing and improving assistive technologies and applications and so on, maybe. So what if we could construct infrastructure, I guess build infrastructure sounds better, around, live in assistive technology development? I used to work at Palm. We worked on the Pre, if you ever heard of the Pre. If not, that's okay. And the Pixie, it's a follow-on product. So we used to carry them around in our pockets all the time, even if they were getting super hot because power management was broken, or even if it was a little bit buggy. We used to call it living on a device. You use it like a normal phone, like a normal person would. Fun fact, the CEO of Palm at the time, John Rubenstein, Ruby, he used to update his phone to the latest build in the morning. He used to get on the Cal train, and he used to ride on the train and use the device in the same way every day in the same general environment. So on the train, passing through different cell and Wi-Fi and other, radio connectivity scenarios, sometimes no signal, etc. So basically doing the same activities. So he had a general idea on a daily basis when things were getting better, things were not working as well as yesterday. Hey, last week this was faster, now it's slower, etc. So it was an interesting way in his case to have someone, you would think a CEO would have better things to do than make sure the single flagship product that will make or break the company was actually working. Go figure. So if you're living on the device or devices that you're developing, you have a better sense of how they're working or not working, improving or not improving over longer time horizons. Right? You're not just trying it out for an hour in a focus group. You're not just giving it a test because I have a moment and I get an Amazon gift card when I'm done or whatever. You're actually using the device, and we can call this co-creation, where you tell your product designers or developers or both what you're experiencing while you're living on the product. So you, as a co-creative input, provide this information as an active part of the development product development process. It could be a product, it could be a service, so it could be software, it could be an application on a smart device or a device in general. It could be some cloud application, it could be an actual service that is provided, it could be anything, or how they all are integrated. So it's kind of a wide open field of potential. So where to find participants, though, in such a co-creation effort? Companies and other inventors, not investors, but inventors, already develop assistive technologies. And you can read about these stories, as I have, if you really want to see a dramatic problem, I guess. You can look up Toyota when they bought the Dean Kamen wheelchair that could climb stairs. You know what I'm talking about. So if you look up Toyota's attempt to take that and to productize it, there's a lot of excitement around announcing such things and spending money on such things. When the product launched, there was almost universal panning because it was far too heavy. It was oversized, so it didn't fit through doorways as easily. It didn't fit in many places. So far too heavy, battery life not sufficient, expensive, right? So it was not a great thing that they came out with, that they continued development on. So Dean Kamen had the best of intentions. He also invented the what the hell was that thing called? I'm totally spacing on it. I didn't look this up because it's sort of tangential, but the scooter thing that it had two wheels and you could lean forward and it would go forward. I'm totally spacing. A lot of security and some police, changing the laws so it was legal to operate on a sidewalk. Totally spacing on the name. Anyway, so his wheelchair that could climb stairs, I think it had 6 wheels, was another invention. He sold it to Toyota. They continued development and it just didn't go well. And one of the questions that would come up if you read about it is, Did you ask anyone you would intend to be your audience, your future customers? Did you ask them if this was going to be good? So they probably didn't. So convincing companies like Toyota in this case, or Amazon, or First Build, which used to be a GE company, now it's a what's the name of that company? It's Korean. I'm totally spacing again. Height, is it? Can't remember. I think it's Height or something. But anyway, First Build is a maker space that was focusing on appliances and sort of living space type things, GE, right? So when I spoke to them, they were very excited about it. The challenge then is to convert that excitement, that initial excitement, into not necessarily action right away, but an action plan. Some of that would be, here's how we're going to actually connect with people for a co-creation effort. So who would we do that with? Well, what if we could work with an existing infrastructure designed to enable general support for those with injuries or other challenges aimed at general life improvement, with funds and management of data regarding this cohort of people, responsible parties, some oversight, some reasonable oversight? Well, I entered the Veterans Administration. I had 2 opportunities in consecutive years here in Vegas at a KBIS show, the Kitchen and Bath Industry Show, to run into one Jason Latona, who is the Chief of Specially Adapted Housing at the Veterans Administration in Washington, D.C. He was in town both of these years to speak to contractors, designers of kitchens and baths, designers of designs, but designers of interaction between, let's say, ramps and bathroom layout. And so getting around, designing wider doorways and how to integrate that into remodels and so on. So they were talking to contractors and subcontractors and designers about grants and other support for development of new and improving existing living spaces for veterans, so remodels or new construction. And the Veterans Administration makes funds available to accomplish these things for injured veterans and other. I'm not in charge of making those decisions, but so we'll start with veterans who need these quality of life improvements in their living spaces. So specially adapted housing. We had a really good conversation the first year. The second year I returned, he remembered me. We had a continued conversation. We ended with, hey, you should send me a grant proposal so we can get it, because we don't have, and this is from him. He's the person making decisions. They have no engagement path between the Veterans Administration, the VA, and developers of the actual technologies, the actual devices, the services. Putting in a ramp in a home is fine. Getting a roll-in shower, getting plumbing that can work. These are things that have been going on for years, decades. Those are okay, but they really didn't have anybody to talk to at your Amazons and your Googles and your Facebooks and your smart displays and smart speakers. And now we have more smart kitchen appliances and home security, home monitoring. How are these things all being connected together so that someone with some sort of, let's say, a challenge could make use of these integrated into a specially adapted home for life improvement, right? Quality of life, comfort, security, privacy, dignity, all these nice things. They basically had to go with off-the-shelf products, and they often did not work. They did not work together. So the notion of our initial collaboration to develop these additional collaborations, so that is to say, collaborate with the VA to develop a collaboration framework for small inventors, small startups, innovators in the early days of their product development, and also bigger companies that just didn't account for these sort of specialized engagements. I often tell people that, the smart speaker technology, I don't want to say any of the activation words right now, but smart speaker technology is interesting for people who don't have use of their limbs or they're not completely ambulatory. Wouldn't it be nice if you could guarantee, or at least extremely elevate intensely the accuracy and precision with which these smart speakers or far field microphone arrays can they do better at recognizing, rejecting audio from radio or YouTube videos or television? Don't mix up the commands. So speaker recognition, more precise voice recognition, and of course now we'll start to see a for-pay rollout of a premium product from Amazon. We'll see where that goes. But you're focusing on gee whiz. What if you focused on real practical applications? Well, suddenly now you really got to get it right when you say turn on the hot water for my bathtub. Because if you don't have dexterity, or hopefully you can imagine, although statistically you can't. So you really need the technology to work. So convincing companies that this would be a good thing, you would think would be a challenge, but helping veterans is not a hard sell, so to speak. I don't mean to diminish the value of the outcomes. Helping veterans very rarely bad. So the idea was to start working with the VA. They were proactively interested, and start developing an infrastructure to connect companies, large and small, new ideas, new inventions, with veterans already working with the VA on specially adapted housing projects, so we could integrate in assistive technologies, new, old, improving, completely innovative and novel, and connect the people using these devices, living on them, to the companies, the inventors, for a, maybe you could say continuous, but an ongoing, at least, co-creation communication loop. So you could say, hey, is this working? Well, it works with this other product. It doesn't work with this other one. And it causes problems. It interferes. It doesn't always understand when I'm speaking. And again, you're focusing on people who depend on these products. To what degree would vary, but you're speaking to people for whom getting voice recognition correct, even though they are unable to speak clearly for some reasons, perhaps, or whatever the circumstances. And the circumstances would vary. So you would have a nice population of people really putting your products and services to the test, and with a trust model to maintain privacy and security of data, so you're not oversharing. So isolate personally identifying information to the degree that it's practical. You may need the address of a home to deliver the latest hardware device or similar, but you wouldn't necessarily need to know the name of the person and the specific circumstances. That's none of your business, right? Knowing the name and attaching it to that is none of your business. So knowing the circumstance, you don't need to know the person. That would be up to them to decide. But keeping patient data private, essentially, similar idea. HIPAA, high tech, there are standards around this, so it would be compliant with that. So building that infrastructure to connect, to communicate during the co-creation process, to facilitate this collaboration, to make it an ongoing collaboration with the sensitivities I've already described, would be most of the undertaking. So Casa Nunzia is not a product development project. It's not a real estate company. It's not looking to build out homes. It is literally an innovation facilitation platform. Ideally, people sitting at the table would be from Amazon and from the other end of the company life cycle spectrum, right? Hey, we're a two-person company. We're trying to make this technology better because my parents would benefit from it, right? I'll tell you right now, I have an idea. Why does it take such dexterity and flexibility to turn off the water to a commode toilet in a traditional American home? If you are living in place, if you are an advancing years, you may not have the balance, you may not have the dexterity, the flexibility to bend down and get your hand in there and so on. And what if, say, a small accident occurs and there's a leak from the commode itself? How do you get down there and turn that water off? Sounds like the voice of experience. So my question was, why is there not like an easy button? You have them in factories. You can shut down an entire assembly line by hitting a button. Why can't I turn off the water flowing into my toilet or onto the floor by hitting a button that's easily accessible to someone who may not have full dexterity and mobility? Hey, yeah, we could do that, said someone from a plumbing company, but they won't, because there's no money in it. So you have to really connect value proposition with better products, with the upside of just doing good for people, for fellow humans. And the population of veterans who would benefit from this, of course, is what it is, but it would only be the beginning. Unfortunately, we had this conversation, Jason and I, wherein he said, you should send me a grant proposal in February of 2020. And that's when the Casa article in Wired magazine came out. So February of 2020 was an interesting time. Of course, 1 month later, nobody was thinking about assistive technology, co-creation, and so on. So aging in place is now known as living in place. It's essentially accounting for future needs in one's living space, assuming continued residence into the unknown. You never know if you're going to become less ambulatory, less dexterous, less flexible. Certainly our eyesight declines over time, so lighting, reducing trip hazards, don't have little tiny step up, step down, try to keep level flooring, make it navigable by wheelchairs or scooters, wider doorways, hallways, strategic bathroom layout. The list goes on. It turns out my own mother does some of this work. She designs ADA bathrooms and kitchens and other spaces. Being able to cook for yourself when circumstances change and it's not as easy to get around or to reach up above the tall cabinets or to work with the microwave. Famously, Amazon was shipping a word enabled microwave oven, voice enabled, right? So you could tell your microwave to cook things. And I have a screenshot somewhere of a question that someone asked on the Amazon website. They said, why would anyone need a voice activated microwave? And the answer from a customer, a user of the product, said, well, my husband is blind and now he can use the microwave because the buttons on the front of most microwaves are not accessible. You cannot figure out which one's the 5 and the 2 except for trial and error, right? Eventually I'm sure you learn, but these are not devices made for vision impaired. They're made for the normal, quote unquote, normal people using the product. So when you account for this extra population of people who could now use your product a little bit more easily, it's confusing to some. The worst case is when it's confusing to the product developers, product designers, and this is where co-creation, especially in assistive technology, can be so critical. With the VA focus on adapted housing for veterans for quality of life improvement, it makes sense to integrate a co-creation concept into the very home in which they reside. A home adapted physically and mechanically can become a test platform for other technologies so we can find out what works and what does not on an individual basis. And again, with privacy, security, comfort, other things accounted for. And of course, if they were not accounted for, you would capture that as feedback as well. Like, hey, I noticed my name is showing up in places that it shouldn't. That seems like a minor concern, but why would you want to give away your name when you were told that you wouldn't, right? So these would be as important as anything else, getting feedback throughout the entire workflow, if you will. The keys to this approach are essential. So each individual has unique circumstances. You never know. One situation may be different from another in small ways, but they may be significant, especially to each individual. So personal differences, challenges, scenarios, and so on, plus the home itself, the adaptations that have been applied, the terrain, what is Wi-Fi access like? What is internet access like where you are located? Can we guarantee, because nothing is more frustrating than a system that depends on being online and then it isn't. Suddenly you are unable to function and move around, for example. That's an awful circumstance. Management of details sufficient to enable iterative product design and development while maintaining individual privacy. These are paramount. You cannot participate in a co-creation endeavor believing that you are just offering your feedback. You're not going to be published in a paper by name if you don't want to. You're not going to have your medical conditions or improvements or otherwise divulged. It's not anyone's business but your own. That's the nature of the world, or it should be. So doing this with a privacy awareness built in would be one of the advantages to having a sort of a centralized platform for co-creation and collaboration, they're like a buffer or a wall, right? So personal information need not pass through to the inventors and developers and so on. And integration with the VA infrastructure would aid in that last point. So you may not even obtain names and other personally identifying information other than to the extent you would need an address, for example, to ship new hardware, new devices, and so on, or to visit a site and perform some installation or something. These things would all be handled carefully due to the nature of the undertakings and the people involved. So a generally isolated interface, whether it's the VA or other, enables informed iteration. That is, you want to have the people developing a product know, individual circumstances. Why did this happen in your case but not in another? Oh, here's a difference. So you cannot treat individuals as secrets, but you do have to be aware that they are also not open books. You get to read some, but not all. So you don't want to compromise identity information without their consent or without their knowledge. But ideally, you would avoid naming people. And then capturing feedback throughout the co-creation part, that's where you actually get creation feedback, would ultimately make better products for people who need them. But the bonus is that you would end up you could almost guarantee it, but you can eventually make this true, which you'd be making better products for people who want them. Think about this. Back in the day, I was working at Supermac, my first job out of college in 1993. The Newton, the Apple Newton. You may have no idea what that is, but if you do, it was a small tablet. It was very heavy by comparison to today's devices. It didn't really have great battery life. It had basically a monochrome screen, not even grayscale. So pixel on or off, very Mac, 128K Mac-like. It had a little stylus and a little resistive touch screen, so it felt like you were writing on a sort of a squishy, it's an odd sensation, but you're writing on like a squishy piece of plastic because it's making contact with a contact grid, and then it draws pixels and so on. So that's the Newton in a very tiny nutshell. And it had a handwriting recognizer technology that did not really work. So people who wanted this product were like, ooh, it's the newest, coolest thing. And then you'll find historically there's Doonesbury cartoon strips, and there are other jokes and comments about how you would write a word and it would come up with some other word. And it's almost like autocorrect today when it continuously changes one word to another, and then you send it and you're like, that's not what I meant. So the Newton was built entirely on these sorts of errors, and it didn't make for a good customer experience. Well, what if you made the product and were testing it, co-creating it with people with the worst handwriting or with the worst writing mechanical interactions? Like, it could be somebody with limited mobility. It could be somebody with a particular way that they could write with a stylus that was not, air quotes, normal. Somebody who maybe writes better with one hand versus the other, but you've designed it for more right-handed versus left-handed, etc. So if you actually co-created something like a Newton with people with the largest writing with their hands or using a stylus, it could be somebody not using their hands to write. Think about that. So if you actually designed the Newton with that in mind, and you aimed at the most challenging cases of handwriting, or we'll say stylus input, you might actually have come out with a better product. So essentially, if you developed a Newton for people who would need a Newton, today you could come up with more cases. Back then, it was still a gee-whiz product. It was a product of Apple's advanced technology group, in fact. So if you imagine something like that, though, people who want a product, they're going to get the product, and it's not going to be great. And maybe there's a version 2, although nowadays people are getting much more aware of products like the Humane Pin and the Rabbit R1. They came out around CES 2024. They purported to be artificial intelligence enabled products that you would wear or carry, separate device. Both dismal failures. Did they try them out with people who needed them, or did they just sell a product to people who wanted them? You can guess. So today, suppose you had a humane pin, and the humane pin was like a brooch that had a camera, and it had like a tap interface, and it would draw on your hand with a laser-like display. So you didn't have a full-size display. You could hold your hand up to it. It would draw text or some other interface elements or something. It was an unusual product, and it had a gee whiz factor. But what if it was used by people who are vision impaired to help navigation, people that are hearing impaired to alert them of particular sounds, the sounds of sirens, emergency vehicles, the sound of a fire alarm, the sound of a door knocking, right? So these are some things that people have if they are hearing impaired. So you can get these technologies, but integration, actual comfort, usability, these are things you can learn. And the humane pin, for example, could have been a really interesting product for people who need a product like this, who would really benefit quality of life, production by a street. Another example I always gave years ago was Google Glass, the image recognition glasses. It had a camera that would recognize faces, could recognize objects. I never got one of those, but they did release what they called Google Goggles. Now it's Google Lens. Google Goggles back in the old days. You could try it on your phone because the Google Glass products were still running Android anyway. So as an experiment, I took a sort of a poor lighting conditions. I crinkled up some currency, American currency, 10s, 5s, 1s, crinkled them up so they're not laid out flat and nice. And I took pictures of them with Google Goggles, and it was able to identify these bills. Now, if you're vision impaired, identifying currency is useful. And that's just one example. And this was not ideal conditions. It was, again, low light, crinkled up bills, not laid out flat. So it is possible to take some of these gee whiz technologies and make them what you could call life-changing products or life-changing applications of these products. And then ultimately, when you make a product work better for people who need them, you end up with products that generally work better. And the people who want them will be more happy. Like, ooh, I'll pay more money for that. It actually works. I know, it's crazy. So Vegas. I'm in Vegas. You should be in Vegas. You'll be here eventually. The greater Vegas area has a large veteran population. I don't know the number exactly, but the last time I looked at a number was a few months ago. I think it was 166,000 in Clark County out of 2.3 million. So it's not 50%, but it is, I believe, arguably, of course, one of the larger ratios. So as a percentage of total population of this region, the Clark County region, it is up there pretty high. So, and this is just retired veterans, separated veterans. It may also include active duty because we do have 2 Air Force bases, Nellis and Creech, among other possible deployments. But we do have local resources as well for managing veterans housing. That's down in Boulder City. So that's I think it's a government office or a government, an NGO that interfaces with the VA regarding veteran housing in the greater Vegas area. So we have that as a basis. Vegas is a destination city, of course, so we have no shortage of conventions and trade shows and different types of companies visiting. I mentioned KBIS. You can go to CES, KBIS, Construction Show, others. I've done so, and you can talk to people from AARP, the American something Association of Retired People, I believe it is. So people and companies that are oriented towards aging in place, living in place, special needs, assistive technologies, they come to Vegas. So why not make some useful intersection and interaction possible? So if something like the Casa Nunzia project were based in Vegas, you always have an influx not only of people developing and designing and continuing both of those for potentially useful assistive technologies, but you have a central sort of organizer, facilitator in the form of Casa Nunzia to engage with them directly and then facilitate additional interaction and engagement with potential collaborators, co-creators. While working with the VA and the veterans in general is an ideal starting point. And again, I don't want to treat this as like a business opportunity, but it makes a lot of sense. And the discussion I had with Jason Latona from the VA indicated that he felt the same way. This is an opportunity to develop an otherwise non-existent connection between various companies and individuals, inventors, and so on, who are building products but not getting feedback, not being told that they're just not good. And you know what? When you talk to people who do need, I emphasize the word need, these technologies to work, they need them. They actually need them. I mean, technology has offered a promise of life improvement, quality of life improvement in general for years, decades, post-war invention, movies, and so on. But when you actually speak to people, just imagine every time your phone doesn't work, every time your phone crashes or reboots, or an application doesn't do what you wanted, or a website's down, or whatever. Just things you encounter day to day. My headset won't pair with my phone. My microwave is is timing out early. Why are these things doing this? I don't know. Well, now imagine that you are unable to move. You are unable to call for help. You are unable to get yourself out of a troubling or dangerous situation. You are unable to prepare food. You're unable to do a lot of things, right? Anything that's dependent on functionality in a predictable way. When those predictions go wrong, when the thing fails, or when it does the wrong thing, that's not just annoying. That can be unhealthy. It could be unsafe. It could be literally dangerous, possibly even life-threatening. So why not include the people that need these things in the development process? In the Veterans Administration, especially Adapted Housing Unit, the cohort of people with whom we might work to engage and develop these interactions with inventors, designers, developers of assistive technologies just makes sense. But it wouldn't end with veterans. It wouldn't end with the VA, of course. This is a general starting point. Application of this strategy with others, including those of advanced age, so rest homes, assisted living homes, they used to call them nursing homes, hospitals with people who stay for extended periods. So your hospital room should be similarly responsive to you. You will find no shortage of guardrails on beds and call buttons, but voice activation perhaps instead of the wired remote that some TVs have. Just some simple things that would work better, a little bit better, to be more comfortable in a smart speakers, smart screens that enable visual communication with family and loved ones, etc. The list goes on. So hospitals, especially for those of advanced age, but also younger people, children's hospitals, people who develop maladies, but also those born with congenital medical issues, other challenges. So there's a whole spectrum of people to engage with to develop better products and services in the assistive technology space to just make them work better. These are people who need these things, not who want them. And again, the products will be better for people who want them. You end up developing better things when there are real, I was going to say consequences, but real legitimate considerations to be made with evidence, rather than sitting in a cubicle somewhere saying, who's going to need this? You hear from the 25 people in a cohort testing your product how much they need it, and then suddenly it becomes important. There's Blackfire Innovation here in Vegas, focusing specifically on gaming and hospitality development innovation. So gaming and hospitality, two great tastes. There's already a general awareness of potential for prototype hospitality development. They actually have, I believe it's 2 mock-up hotel rooms at Blackfire. Blackfire is on the top floor of the Tech Center in near UNLV, the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, just down the street, closer to IKEA, actually. Speaking of, I mean, IKEA is one big giant prototype of a lot of things, I think. So we could literally prototype devices in prototype hotel rooms with some initial interest via the VA and some demonstrable progress, perhaps. The hope would be to reach out maybe through Blackfire to the hospitality industry here in Vegas. There's a lot of hotel rooms here, something like 150,000. I think that's a guess from memory. It could be more. When the Tropicana gets torn down in October, it will be slightly less. But that's not funny. The possibility of converting a few of these rooms into usable live-in prototypes, Casa Jasmita model. Oh, I'm going to stay in your hackable hotel room. Perhaps there's a mobility, vision, hearing, other senses, something where a person staying in that room could actually be a part of an overall collaboration to say, hey, when I'm traveling, I have other, I can't travel with the same devices and equipment that I normally have on me. So what would make life better when I'm taking a vacation in town for a conference or a trade show? We have 40 million people visiting the greater Vegas area every year at this point in post-pandemic numbers. 2023 and 2024, I think, were both around 40 million from the numbers I've seen. Some fraction of those people would be interested and interesting to co-create a little bit. Hey, let's go co-create in Vegas. But there's always a but. And it's kind of a big one, unfortunately. Discussions with the VA were in February of 2020, like I said, so the world took a bit of a turn a month later. There was never a reconnection with the VA as the U.S. came out of the general lockdown state. I do know, as of a year ago, I do know that the same person was working in specially adapted housing, decided not to answer emails, may not even remembered who I was. Who knows? That makes it a little bit difficult. I've heard from some people, some older people, in the startup community, whatever that is, that assistive technologies are just not financially viable in the commercial marketplace. Retail assistive, meh. It's really hard to make money. This is old thinking, no pun intended. And I'm not kidding. There are people that are, 60s, 70s. They're saying, yeah, you just can't make money in that. But you may need that. It's amazing to me how interesting things become when need enters the picture. Nobody wants that, but some people need these things. And the promise of technology is supposed to fulfill those needs, or address them at least. That's been the pitch the whole time. Oh, it'll make your life better. It is bias to overcome, possibly without leaning on the VA, but people do need to realize that someday you might benefit from this. Poo-pooing it today, this is a comfort debt, perhaps. You're putting off till the future where at some point you may say, boy, I wish I had voice-activated technologies that work because my hands no longer do, etc. As is usual, the case in Vegas is always the same. Everybody is interested in ideas until there is an ask of some sort. Then they go silent. Collaboration with Blackfire Innovations, for example, Blackfire Innovation, singular, for example, would begin with lowering expectations drastically if they ever did decide to respond in some way, because I have had this conversation with Blackfire and they sounded very interesting, but we would begin by just imagining that they're not really interested. So lower expectations of them. So despite initial indications of actual interest, they disappeared. And this is the usual. But it's not just Vegas. The person at the VA who assured me that, how did he phrase it? Send me a grant proposal and I am the one who approves grant proposals. Is that clear? So moving forward, this is still on the table. It's still on the back burner of this table, whatever that means. We are all getting older, and retail technology is not really aware of that. Nobody, except for the jitterbug cell phone. There are a few things that somebody will say somewhere. Hey, is your eyesight getting worse? Are you, the people who make glasses and hearing aids and canes and wheelchairs and walkers, they know their target audience. They know people are getting old. The people making those products understand. I'm going to be using one of these one time, so I might develop a good one. Is there something better than tennis balls to aid with the moving across the floor with a walker? There is. So moving forward, there is a lot of opportunity here to fulfill some fraction of that promise about technology that can make life better. When I worked at Philips, their company logo was "Let's make things better." Maybe they mean that. Working with the VA still makes sense, of course. Whether Jason or somebody else, everybody changes jobs eventually. In the meantime, efforts to foster ideation and innovation in general continue. I am the managing director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, and we definitely try to convince, especially younger people, to turn ideas into tangible outcomes, and you can try them. Don't be afraid of trying new ideas. Good ideas don't go away. They just move lower on the priority list for now. So that's the story of Casa Nunzia so far. It is entirely possible that 1 year from today, there will be a thriving intersectional assistive technology co-creation hub here in Vegas, which when people talk about Vegas being an innovation hub, it's an innovation destination, but I can think of no better place to try out at least the notions. People who visit Vegas who would benefit from assistive technologies might get a first exposure to some of the cutting edge, like, oh, this is the latest in really useful visual image management. You can, so for example, you could have a camera pointed at you in your bed, in the bathroom, etc. And you could have computing technology in your home that doesn't send your images to the cloud. You're never going to find your images of yourself sleeping or showering or whatever up on the pick a website, because none of the imagery need leave the house. The computing power has reached a level now where you can do a lot of the necessary image recognition. You could do facial recognition. You could recognize moods, gestures. You could see if someone falls, right? Being able to alert authorities if someone has taken a fall in a shower is maybe something useful. Can be done. So, but, oh, the person, okay, they're getting up, so they're not unconscious. There's not an immediate danger of drowning in the shower water. So the authorities could be alerted, perhaps establish communication with the person. How are you doing? Are you okay? We're going to enter your home, etc. So the technologies exist to make these small moves, but we could try these. And if people visit Vegas and they experience some initial tests of these, some initial engagements, early experiences, they may go home having joined the effort to be co-creators in the assistive technology development universe. And maybe there'd be some good things about Vegas. Ha! Anyway, don't forget to check out buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo, Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo. Keep no obligation to spend any money once again. And you can keep up with as I get websites up and running and whatnot. And hey, someday we may get Casa.Nunzia.org back online as a proper nonprofit, perhaps 501c3 even. To be continued. Thanks for listening. And this being Friday, at least where I am, make the best of your weekend. Cheers.